artificial intelligence will completely transform our world. But what is AI? Why will it affect you? And how can you and your business survive and thrive through the AI revolution? Welcome to AI and You. Here is your host, author, speaker, and futurist, Peter Scott.
Hi, welcome to episode 256. I'm talking with Diane Gutiw, VP and leader of the AI Research Center at the global business consultancy CGI. She holds a PhD in medical information technology management and has led collaborative strategy design and implementation planning for advanced analytics and AI for large organizations in several sectors. Last week, we talked about how enterprises manage the integration of AI at the dizzying speeds of change today, where AI does and does not impact employment, how the HR department should change in those enterprises, how they should deal with hallucinations, and how to manage the risks of deploying generative AI in customer solutions. This week, we're going to talk about synthetic data, digital triplets, agentic AI, continuous autonomous improvement, and best practices for compliance. Let's get back into the interview with Diane Gutiw. When I think about QA, I think about large amounts of test data, and that perforce includes data that wasn't encountered in real situations, but is synthesized. And in AI, we talk about using synthetic data in training when we've run out of real data, but there would be perhaps the valid use of synthetic data at inference testing. So what largely is the role of synthetic data in deployment of AI?
Yeah, synthetic data is such a great use case for generative AI, both for training the AI as well as for other purposes, because you can create a statistically correct data set in the format you want without it ever having to see the real data. A good example of where I've seen it really provide a high value is if there's a new AI solution being integrated into a health system or into a financial system. And in order for that new AI add-on plug-in to be added, it needs to understand the context of your organizational data, but you don't want to put it on your real data because it's testing and training and fine-tuning. So generating statistically correct information for that model to be trained is reducing the risk of putting something that's not in production against your production data, right? So that's one example of where we've seen a real value. So it's statistically correct, right down to, if I'm looking at health data, to the demographics of the population, of the types of complaints and diagnoses of a population, of the types of tests and outcomes of tests. You can create statistically correct data and never have it look at the real data in order to fine-tune that model. Another fantastic use of generative AI data would be if I want to be able to test it against, say, contact center. I keep coming back to that one because it's nice and simple. I'm able to generate the types of questions based on all different types of users and age and demographics and skill levels to be able to throw at the solution to test how well it's able to respond and come up with an answer without having to have, in the past, you might have needed 5,000 people hitting this to be able to get it the amount of volume of training that it needs to be able to continue to get more precise. If I can generate that using past experience and have it mimic different age, different languages, different ways of asking questions, it's going to improve the quality without having to find those 5,000 people to try to hit it, and do it in a much more reliable way because I'm, again, able to hit those different demographics and ways of asking questions.
Again, on the subject of quality control, you've extended the concept of a digital twin, which is a digital simulacrum of some real-world situation, to a digital triplet, which adds, I'll let you explain it, but it's some sort of meta function there, meta role that's an AI observer type thing. But I wonder if you could describe that better than me and speak to how that can address, in particular, the quality assurance of AI, because it seems to me that there is an aspect of that.
Yeah. So Digital triplet has really taken off. And the concept to start with was really quite simple. If you think of a digital twin, it's a digital representation of reality. So it could be anything from a patient, where I have a digital representation of all of the aspects of a medical patient. So diagnostic imaging, genomics, clinical history, lab results, past incidents. And that digital twin allows you to be able to explore the holistic view of the patient. A different view would be, let's say, on a utility grid, where I have a lot of IoT data, a lot of devices sitting on power poles and other organizational assets, right from their trucks down to their other equipment. And the digital twin is taking all that information and representing, recreating that utility grid in a way that I'm able to see how everything is performing and interrelating together. And those existed. Those existed long before generative AI. The concept of the digital triplet is adding a layer on top of that that allows the human operator or the clinician to be able to interrogate that data with natural language and go further than the what if scenarios that you usually would see in a digital twin by being able to have a conversation with the data. So if we look at the utility grid again, I put a layer of generative AI on top of it, and I'm able to ask it in natural language, if this area of the grid goes down, how would the power best reallocate? What would that do with these high intensive power needs over here? What could I do differently if these two grids went down? And while you're able to do that with a lot of the tools and the models that exist on a digital twin, the difference is you're getting the advice using natural language, and you're able to have a conversation with that organizational data and continue to explore. Our machine vision, for example, will sit and look at a particular asset, let's say a bridge, and the machine vision is constantly looking and may send an alert saying, on this bridge, there's a deterioration here that could be a safety concern. That's all it's going to tell you. With the digital triplet, you get the so what. So what does that mean? When should I shut this down? If I don't shut it down until after rush hour, what's the risk of that? Okay, if I'm going to shut it down, where do I reallocate traffic so that I avoid backlogs? And it really gives you that extended information, again, in natural language, as if you had your best group of assistants off going to get information, coming back and giving you answers to questions. Everything from explain what the issue is, explain what that error means, to what is the outcome of this. If we look at the patient, we're able to ask, okay, what does this brain bleed mean? What that spot that you're indicating, okay, this is a 96-year-old patient. What non-surgical interventions might be appropriate? And what is the implication of using that versus another treatment protocol or in oncology? What's the best clinical trial for this very complex patient makeup and genomics? The digital triplet, usually agentic AI, is able to understand the context of all the data and bring it back together into a holistic view and advise the expert on what their best next steps are. So that's the concept, and it really has taken off.
I can understand that. So when you're interacting with the triplet to ask questions of the twin, where is the physical model that the twin has embodied contained and active? And I'll expand on that. So if the model is of a bridge and you're interested in loading and stresses and response to winds and so forth, that's not something that's predictable by generative AI. It might, if you asked a large language model that, it would go through its history of knowledge about things like the Tacoma Narrows Bridge and give you some sort of plausible sounding answer. But the actual answer that you look for is given in the twin by sophisticated finite element analysis and other things that is not predictable without looking at those results. So there's that physical model. For the triplet to give you the right answer to questions about the loading on the bridge, does it ingest that analysis and figure out a world model, or does it somehow punt that to the twin and translate the answer back for you?
Yeah, it's a conversation with the twin. And it's using a number of agents that are specifically trained on the context. So one, let's say we have a bridge that's going over a river. One will understand the context of tides. Another one will understand the context of the makeup and the design of that bridge, maybe everything from the type of materials it's developed with to what the fault is that it's found, and be able to extend that. So think of models that are trained in context to the problem it's trying to solve, and it would be more than one model. One might be very good at going retrieving information, another one might be really good at the history and be trained on bridge infrastructure, so that it's really giving that very expert information. But the conversation with the twin is absolutely critical. The nice thing about agentic AI is these agents sit there all the time and they're constantly consuming the latest information. So it will be able to take the images from the satellite, from the drone, from the static cameras that may be on it, as well as understand the tide charts. So it'll know in another 2 hours the tide is going to be high, and that's going to exacerbate this problem it's already indicated. And it's going to let the person know that, where the machine vision will just say, hey, I've got a problem over here. The digital triplet will say, I've got a problem over here, and you've got 2 hours to deal with this because the tide is coming up and this is only going to get worse. Maybe not the best example, but that's the sort of conversation that it would have, because it sits there knowing what's going on as well as understanding the bridge. We're seeing a real investment and move to these small language models that maybe don't have the whole internet, but it's really been trained on this specific function. And those small language models are critical in this digital triplet agentic approach, because I need this one model to really understand how bricks deal with water.
What's the essential feature of agentic AI that creates leverage? Because it seems that label has been applied to a number of things where it really wasn't deserved. I mean, I could create a cron job or a scheduled task that fired off a query to ChatGPT through the API, the same one at the same time every day, took the answer and said, what's the difference between yesterday's answer, and turned that into something that it emailed me. And if that means I've just created agentic AI just by making a scheduled task, it seemed that wasn't anything particularly groundbreaking. And yet that's exactly the description of something that I've done with the scheduled task feature in OpenAI that was touted as agentic AI. So where's the essential value proposition in agentic AI that wasn't there before?
Yeah, I think the real difference, if you're talking about, the move from RPA, so automation, to intelligent automation, which is what you're talking about, I can task it to do something and it's much smarter. It's able to do more than just move this piece of data from A to B, which maybe RPA did. Agentic AI, the autonomous nature and the ability to make decisions is what's different. So with intelligent automation, it was still very much scheduled tasks. I want you at this time to do this thing. With agentic AI, they're sitting and they're listening. They're aware of the context to a much better degree, and they're able to reason within the scope and parameters you set. So this is designed by the human, and we have oversight. I don't want to take that away either. You need the dashboards and the monitoring of these things. But very like the best assistant you've ever had is always going to be gathering that information and has been given the realm to say, if these things happen, do what you need to do to alert me. Do what you need to do to change this task. For example, let's go back to our bridge. If something critical is about to happen on a bridge, it would have the ability to alert that. It may also have the ability to say, okay, I'm going to put the stoplight down. No one's crossing this bridge because we've hit this point. And it's going to then trigger another task that may do the next step. So autonomous, continuously learning, continuously monitoring, and the ability to make decisions outside of what you would identify as a specific task, because that's the realm, that's the purpose and the job we've given to that agent.
And is it something that could identify the next task to be performed?
Yes, exactly. And make the decision to trigger that. So usually you'd have an orchestrator agent that if it's something that is triggered, I have a really complex problem and I want you to go get the answer to a question. The orchestrator would say, okay, you guys go retrieve, you guys generate, and I want you guys to fact check. bring it back to me in a graph, and then I'll present it back to the human. It's the same thing with the less triggered. These agents are sitting, their job is to monitor the safety of this particular asset. And if something is unsafe, they're going to have the ability to take the action to make it safe. Anything from stopping the thing to alerting the person to whatever that next best action is.
Are we at or approaching the point of using agentic AI for hands-off continuous improvement of processes? I mean the kind where it detects a problem and not only alerts you, or maybe it doesn't if it thinks it can fix it, but improves the process to make the reoccurrence of that less likely.
Yeah, I think we're very close. I mean, this is really new technology, true agentic AI, but at the last few industry events, both in healthcare, manufacturing, utilities as well, this is the hot topic. And all of our vendor partners, industry partners are working on exactly what you just said in designing solutions and agentic solutions that can be configured to be able to take action and do the right thing, understand what the next best action is. And again, within the parameters that you're comfortable, be able to go further. I also hear from the industry, it's absolutely critical to monitor these, to have dashboards, and the human in the loop that's actually getting the advice and making the decision is moving to human on the loop, which is listening and monitoring and deciding this is where I'm comfortable. And we can't take that away because, as you say, these technologies are not perfect yet. I don't know if they'll ever be perfect. Are they more perfect than the human? Was a great debate I heard last week. It's only monitoring that's going to tell that. So it's still very early days. That's the direction these technologies are going in. If we look at having these, go back to the second agent for quality checking, having the ability to understand you took that from the wrong source and then instructing the first agent to go back and get the information from the right source, there's an example of having that autonomy to go and direct the first agent to fix it. And continuous improvement is built into that.
And as you say, monitoring, because some people may be aware that I was just describing the origin story for Skynet. So a lot to be careful of, which actually brings me to a different topic. You're co-chair of the Canadian Advisory Council on AI, and I wonder what that is achieving, what its processes are like, what lessons you've learned and they've learned from that.
Yeah, it's a very early role. I don't have the answers to your questions yet. I know that the desire is to make sure that we build in our culture into our AI policy and guidance, to provide best practices and guidelines for best practices, but I don't have the answers yet because we haven't kicked off the new group. Ask me again in another 6 months.
What do you understand their aims to be?
And my understanding is that as a country, there's a lot going on in the EU. There's a lot going on in the UK with their AI playbook. In the US, across the different states, they're building out their AI policy. And Canada needs to be able to stay in tune with this rapidly evolving technology. We have our own unique needs, so we're not just going to adopt another country's approach. And we really want to be thoughtful in how we drive this. I do believe Canada focuses on innovation, and we want to enable and encourage innovation, but do it in a safe way, that we're protecting individual rights, organizational rights, as well as protecting from systemic risks that come with these tools.
And even sovereignty. I mean, a year ago, the idea that we might need AI that was demonstrably free from US bias against Canada would have seemed like an overreaction. But put that way, right now, given what's happening, and anyone listening to this 5 years from now might want to look up the date just so you know, that's not so far-fetched. In fact, it seems like this is exactly the kind of body that might want to be looking at that.
Even before we were so focused on international politics, all of Canada's guidance has been really focusing on our unique culture. And I like to look at it that way, that we do have a unique culture. We have some of the smartest people in the world right here at home. And we want to foster that. And we want to make sure that we have guidance that really addresses our needs. So being very specific to us, I think, is really important.
So I want to go back to the book chapter that we were discussing before. There are 5 best practices for ensuring compliance with evolving standards in there that I will read out. You wrote them, but I'll save you the trouble. I'm going to read them out and then ask some questions. Those practices are: organizations should develop a clear and distinct purpose for any artificial intelligence solution. Organizations should establish data privacy and artificial intelligence governance teams to help guide and monitor artificial intelligence solutions and outputs. Organizations should assign teams to monitor artificial intelligence solutions and outputs continuously and agilely. Organizations should inform and educate relevant stakeholders about artificial intelligence. And organizations should enable and invest in training for all stakeholders of artificial intelligence. And so my questions are, and those all sound and are very good advice to follow. What is the driving principle that causes those to be emitted at this point as the answer to the question what best practices should be? What differentiates those from best practices for any other disruptive technology?
Yeah, and I would extend these to anywhere you're using data to answer a question. So the gray area into advanced analytics and analytics where we're providing insights into data, I think fall into this as well. The real difference is that information that is being generated by AI is not being generated by a person. And we're leveraging information that's coming from other information sources. It's really critical that we look at this in a way that is focused on what it is we're trying to solve. All of what we've just talked about. What is the problem we're trying to solve? Do we have the right model and approach to answering that question? Are we continuously monitoring and are we protecting any information that is either coming out of the tool because that's new data, or any information that's going into the tool that may be proprietary or sensitive? And that's really what this is focused on. So when you come up with those 5 practices, it really is setting a framework where you're able to do that systematically across your organization, rather than building these out and trying to piecemeal together, having a process in place to streamline it and build it into your organization. And like any, data governance, which was a hot topic a couple of years ago, and it's still absolutely critical. It's just been extended into AI, making sure you're curating information in a way that's protecting information, protecting anything proprietary is critical. The other reason why I think it's really important that you have this framework in place is the technology is evolving. We're not there. We're not at the end of what this technology is going to do yet. And making sure that you have a process in place that you're able to adopt the right technology for the benefits you need without having to reinvent the wheel every time is pretty critical.
Wow. And speaking of time, ours is drawing to a close. When I started this podcast in 2020, I would often ask guests to imagine the world 10 years into the future. That seems grossly unfair now, given how many people are predicting some sort of singularity before then. So I'll take that number out of the demand and just say, as far out as your crystal ball might carry you, what sort of long-term, large-scale disruptive effects are you anticipating that you're going to have to deal with and master?
Oh, looking at the future, how do we apply the best practices we have against AI models where it may be 1 or 2 or a couple integrated models? How do we continue to evolve that in a autonomous, collaborative, agentic framework where there's so many different agents off doing what they need to do in order to support us? How do we apply these best practices in that framework is one. And that's one we're looking at right now. So, it's top of mind for me. And again, the next one will be in this evolution of technology where we may have a model that has already been approved for use, that it's providing us benefit. The next release comes out with something completely new. How do we evolve with that? And as I said at the beginning, our approach right now is both to look at the technology security, privacy, robustness, reliability, as well as ensure the person using it has signed a terms of use, is educated on what the best practices are, and are working within guardrails where a tool may give them the ability to do more. When I look at this technology and I look at all of the things that happen with cyber attacks and phishing and fraud, most of those are not AI, right? And we have the same frameworks in place for our security and security monitoring, privacy monitoring, and best practice use of technology. We really are extending that into AI. The difference is that these tools are generating new information and new data based on past information. So I think if organizations start with what is your existing best practice for technology and what's changed with this, what can you leverage of what you already have is going to help you build in your organizational culture, and then really focus on, okay, what's different with this new bit, and make sure people understand that. My last thought is the most important part of all of this, because the technology is evolving, is AI literacy. You need to make sure that you have a very discerning workforce in using these tools, that they understand where they need to still be involved and not become complacent and blindly trust. And as well, they need to be able to see how it best suits their needs and helps their productivity and helps them grow into what they want to do within their jobs and what organizations want to do in their workflow.
I love how you brought it back to people there at the end, because ultimately this is about creating the better world for people. And that brings us to the end. Diane, where should people go to find out more about you and what you do?
Well, on CGI.com, we have all of our AI experts. I'm up there, as well as all of our teams of people, because we're all different parts of the big puzzle. I know at my realm, and we've got some really amazing people that understand everything from different industries to different types of technologies and use of technologies. It can be found up there, as well as our conversation on digital triplets. If anybody's interested in finding out more, up on CGI.com, there's a page and a number of white papers on digital triplets, which I think is a really exciting way that we're starting to see real value come out of these tools.
Fantastic. Well, it's been a real pleasure. Diane Gutiw, thank you so much for coming on AI and You.
Thank you very much for having me. It was a fun conversation.
That's the end of the interview. Please do give us a like and a top rating on your podcast platform of choice. It makes an enormous difference to our reach and the kind of content we can bring you. In today's news, ripped from the headlines about AI, OpenAI, in collaboration with the MIT Media Lab, has released research into the emotional impact of ChatGPT, drawing from nearly 40 million user interactions and a detailed 4-week trial with 1,000 participants. These studies reveal that while most users treat ChatGPT as a productivity tool, a subset engages emotionally, sometimes for extended periods. Notably, female participants showed a slight decrease in socialization after using ChatGPT, and participants who set the chatbot's voice mode to the opposite gender reported increased loneliness and emotional dependency. Depressing, huh? Particularly at a time when Filtered.com's annual survey reported that the chief use of generative AI is now for companionship. We should definitely watch this space. Next week, my guests will be Emily Bender and Alex Hanna, authors of the upcoming book, The AI Con: How to Fight Big Tech's Hype and Create the Future We Want. That's next week on AI and You. Until then, remember, no matter how much computers learn how to do, it's how we come together as humans that matters.
That's all for this episode of AI and You. Please leave a rating and comment and share with your friends. Get the book Artificial Intelligence and You and see more videos and articles at aiandyou.net. That's aiandyou.net, where you can also send us your questions. Thank you for listening.